Ladies and gents, as we've been looking endlessly at classes recently, I have let 2 dungeons slip by me and giving my reviews and thoughts. And of course, some people are asking about them, and certainly some people specifically asking why I said that the Grimrail Depot, which we're looking at today, was my least liked 5-man. It was my least favourite so far released in Warlords of Draenor, as overwhelmingly the initial reaction to the Grimrail Depot was in fact positive. Very cool, very interesting, very exciting, all this kind of stuff. We're on a train! Yes, this is the storming of the train, disrupting the supply flow of the Iron Horde, all that kind of stuff going on. Kind of a bit of a pull out of something like Metal Gear, right? Something along those lines, and therefore it was super cool on that basis alone. And I disagree. I do disagree, so we're going to take a look at the Grimrail Depot now. Let's get it out the room then. We do get on board a train, and then we go and do stuff on a train. Now, the initial thought is, and this has been proven in a couple of the streams that I've done where I've been inside this instance, is you cannot tell you're on a train for the vast majority of the dungeon. It makes no difference whatsoever. And in fact, what does make it worse, in my opinion, is that the fact that we are on a train and we're inside the train is, in fact, we're very claustrophobic. We're going from train car to train car, and therefore the environment itself is rather lackluster, and that's what really gets me down about it. It's a corridor, essentially, for the majority of the dungeon. You are inside just a corridor, and the only way you can tell you're on a train is either by stopping and then looking up upon high, and you'll see that the background is actually whizzing by you. And that in itself is actually very, very cool. But it doesn't make any difference to the dungeon at all. It really makes no difference to the dungeon at all to see that the mountains are whizzing by you. In fact, there's only one boss in particular that takes advantage of being on a train, and it doesn't really pull it off too well. I think this is a case of a great idea, but wow, the game and the engine and all the design stuff involved there doesn't actually support that kind of gameplay. In fact, many games don't get trains right. I think the only time I've really been excited recently about a train thing was Metal Gear Revengeance, which had a very brief train sort of one-on-one duel, and that was quite cool, and it took advantage of the fact that you were on a train. So, boss number 1, the Goblin and his boss. I kind of think this is a rip from Mad Max. It does remind me, of course, of Master Blaster. That kind of scenario going on. Is actually a very nicely designed boss. Designed to die together, but this has been heavily nerfed. When this dungeon was first released, if you did make the ultimate mistake of killing one of them before the other and left one of them with a significant health margin in that respect, it was a wipe, forcing you to go, oh, we need to do something else here. We can't do that. Now, that has been nerfed, and you can kill one of them rather quickly, which is usually the big guy, and the other one will just fall to the floor, and you can kind of just kill him without much issue whatsoever. So that has had a significant change. Something I didn't think was necessary, because there are mechanics in here to allow you to DPS them both. What will happen here is we have the big guy who obviously has a very hard-hitting melee side of things, and then the goblin who will jump around the room and then ultimately jump onto some of the boxes. This corresponds to a mechanic that the big guy has called Mad Dash. While the goblin is up on the boxes and unreachable by DPS, the larger boss will then initiate Mad Dash and you'll see an arrow on the floor. This is so the tank can actually position the larger mob to hit the boxes and knock the goblin down where they take increased amounts of damage. And that is the mechanic that's supposed to happen. And if you didn't do that previously, then you were certainly going to lead to a wipe because the goblin was un-DPSable for too much the majority of the fight. So now it's been nerfed. This whole mechanic has actually just gone to waste. And you'll see that in the kill I did today, is that the tanks don't do that and it doesn't actually matter. Which is really sad because the mechanic itself, once you figure it out, is nice. It's interesting. Keeps the tank on his toes. It makes people say, you have to DPS this. Okay, we have to use this mechanic of the fight to enable us to actually do our damage in the proper way, and then correspondingly the fight will go down nicely. Now it's a case of Zerg and kill, as far as I can tell. The healing this initially, when it first came out, when I did the healer stuff in there, was very, very difficult, and now it's not, pretty simply. So a little bit sad on this one, as it was an interesting boss, but the nerf to the actual enrage mechanic, we can call it, when one of these 2 bosses dies, actually means that nullifies the rest of the fight. Only people who know of that mechanic will get the fight done quicker, but it won't actually matter. Moving on through, when we actually get on board the train, comes the second boss, which is the one that's taking advantage, I guess we could say, of the fact that we are in a train. Now, that advantage is in the form of wind. If you stand on the actual outsides of the carriage, what you'll find is that you are getting blown back. So this is wow, right? If that's happening to us, we stand where we don't get blown back. This is also the boss that most people are really struggling to figure out. And if only one person, as you can see, I'm the only person who actually knows how this fight works inside the dungeon, it can trivialize it entirely on normal mode, okay? I've yet to do the heroic mode of this. I'm going to do that soon, and obviously we'll see how the challenge mode pays off. But ultimately, you're killing a boss who's inside a cannon. The cannon has an obscene amount of health, and the way you deal with that is by killing the adds, and there are larger adds in two types. One that drops grenades, which you can then use to kill the adds much quicker, reducing damage overall and making things easier, and then other adds who will drop missiles, which you can use the cannons on the side to then shoot the main cannon, and that will then reveal the boss later on so you can kill him. On top of that, we have a fixate. The boss in the main cannon will in fact fixate someone, and you have to line of sight behind the boxes. All these are very, very cool mechanics. Very cool mechanics. The problem is it is so vastly different to what a lot of people have done. Oh my god, when was the last time you had to pick up two different types of reagents, and then you got a boss button, then to use them, then to jump inside cannons and use the materials that you just picked up off the ads? What seems to happen in general, and obviously this will alter hopefully over time, but you're going to deal with this a lot in your pugs, so please guys be aware of how this fight works, is that people simply don't know what's going on and just kill the ads. Kill adds over and over and over again, and what you'll find in many pugs is actually stacks of these larger mobs, the grenaders and the missile carriers, actually just lying on the floor. You can click them all and just keep jumping in and finish the fight yourself. On heroic mode, of course, you will have to be aware of how this fight works, but again, it's one of those with so many different mechanics going on that they've actually nerfed it a little bit. The damage that was going out in the fight, especially if you got focused and didn't line of sight, you were guaranteed to die. Not so much anymore. I out-healed it on the priest video that I've put out today. And in fact, on my rogue, I only got focused once, so I couldn't really show you the damage, but I'm pretty sure I could nullify most of it anyway, and it wouldn't be an issue. Most people are just standing it and taking it to the face and just shooting gads. So this is actually an interesting fight. It is an interesting fight. There's lots going on. There's jumping around. There's all this kind of stuff. You're picking stuff up. You're targeting and focusing specific mobs. Nice target switching going on. Very cool idea. Would love to see this be a little bit more punishing. It shouldn't be a case even on the normal mode, because you are preparing people for heroic and challenge mode. I would love to see that you can't just have one guy know how it works and that trivializes the rest of the fight. Because ultimately I end up doing, in this instance that you can see here, I end up doing everything there, so it's not an issue. Let's move on to the last boss. This last boss has been considered to be the most annoying. And that's sad, really, because there's lots of things going on here to pay attention to. But if you're, again, it's one of those, and this is quite nice in Worlds of Draenor, if you have various people who don't know what's happening, it makes the fight significantly harder. And that's the way it should be. The way it should be. But this is also the one that most people are getting frustrated with because, you know, we're not used to learning these kind of mechanics. Well, not a lot of the random people who go into, especially if they're used to Mr. Pandaria heroic modes, are going in there like, I'm not kind of used to all this stuff going on. So what the hell is happening? Well, we've got a dragon flying around above the train, which is going to be breathing electric fire, which is very cool. And we also have a boss who does significant amounts of melee damage, but he's also firing frost traps, and these two work in synergy. So what will happen is he will fire a frost trap at someone, similar to a hunter trap, set the frost trap off if that person walks into it, freeze everybody in place, this cannot be dispelled, and then the dragon will guaranteed to drop electric fire on top of wherever that trap was dropped. So that is the mechanics of the fight. There is nothing more to it than that. Obviously, this is a very dangerous combination. This is why people are wiping, because you can't dispel this frost unless you have some sort of ability that removes movement impairing effects. So what we tend to have is people, especially melee, not noticing because they're getting frost trap capped on them, and then you get the tank and one or two melee who are stuck in place, and then the electric fire comes, and then suddenly it turns into a big pile of shit because people are dying, and he hits very hard, so tanks are dying shortly after because DPS is too low. I like this fight. There is only one change I want for this fight. Can we have just different coloured electricity on the floor, Blizz? That would be nice, because the frost trap is awkward to see. The only way I'm really coping with it in all the mishmash of melee stuff going on is by watching who it's cast at. If I see a frost trap being tanked at the being cast at the tank or myself, then I'm moving by proxy. What I'm not doing is looking for it on the floor. Although it is large and pretty obvious, mixed in with electric fire and all the blue all over the floor, does make it a little bit of a pain in the ass to see. An arrow or something would make it significantly easier because, let's face facts here, looking who things are being cast on, having target of target for casts, isn't something a lot of people pay attention to on a regular basis. Let's just get that out the way. It isn't. I could do it. You guys could probably do it, and therefore you're going to have a decent time in here and not struggle with this too much. I would also kind of like on normal mode to see this be dispellable. It's nice to see it dispel. Hand of Freedom works, which is always nice, but let's face facts, we should be able to dispel Frost in some fashion, just to help people through the normal mode, something along those lines, because I've seen many groups fall apart at this boss, even to this day. When they get there, they're hitting a brick wall because the healers just can't keep up with people being trapped and frozen inside this stuff. Not to say they would dispel either, but this is my favourite boss in there. Very simple mechanic, a synergy between two mobs, exactly what I want to see. Make the trap a little bit more obvious. I think we got a winner here. Overall, though, disappointing in the dungeon. The corridor style, very claustrophobic. So it's just mob pack after mob pack. AoE, AoE, AoE. And then you move on to the boss, which is a little bit disappointing. Compared to everything else. Not to say it's a bad dungeon. It certainly shits on everything in Mr. Pandaria. But compared to everything else, we've got like Iron Docks, Everbloom, Skyreach, all these Shadowing Burial Grounds, all the other dungeons we're getting in Warlords of Draenor, I do feel this is the weakest. And it being on the train isn't enough to really make it like way up there. Like, oh my god, you get to go on a train. I guarantee most of you will realize that once you get into there is like, oh, being on a train doesn't actually mean anything other than we are trapped inside a carriage for the majority of the fight. There's the Grimrail Depot, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you again. Bye.